We will now hand over to our next presenter, Suretha. And Suretha, she's a team leader and special advisor at Statboek, and she's responsible for advising and interpreting milk recording results to dairy farmers. And Suretha will now continue to present the importance of milk records and record keeping in a production management program. Thank you, Suretha.
Thank you, Elena. I think what I'm going to talk about today is hooking on to all the other guys that spoke this morning, the economics, what Gordon just said, the consultancy of the veterinarian, getting more involved on the farm, not just doing PDs and so on. So yes, as I go on with my lecture, you will see what I mean on that. Let me just quickly share my screen. Can you see my screen? Not yet.
Not yet.
Let me just quickly go there. Okay. I just quickly go to the window. It's not sharing yet. Do you see anything? Not yet.
I can, from my side, I can only see the top taskbar.
Okay, let me just quickly open that one there. Do you see the screen now?
Not yet.
Oh, Elena, I think I'm going to ask you to share the screen then for me, please.
Okay.
From your side. Sorry.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on. Why doesn't it want to share? Okay, thanks so much. Okay, I've based my talk on the module 5 of the production management of the NPO, but you'll see I've added lots of stuff to that. And mainly I'm going to talk about the how and the why of data. And you will see why you need the data to carry on in your practice. So I'm quickly going to talk about computer-based programs and then the value of milk recording as well. So in these days of data, I think most of us feel like this, overwhelmed by data, the amount of data that you get, what do you do with it? And then with the herd sizes that's increasing, management is more complicated. You can't manage what you can't measure. So it is quite important for us to measure as well. So as I said, there is information overload. So what is information overload? Information overload is a problematic process of trying to understand something and make the right decision when we have too much information about what we're trying to decide about. So you've got all this information. What do you do with it? So luckily, there's tools that can help us in this regard. So just the outlines of the chapter, but I'm going to skip some of it. The computerized systems, data input or capture, cal cards, action reports, performance analysis, and value of milk recording. This is all the stuff that you can use in the data management. So just as an introduction, successful herd management relies on good record keeping and on the information which can be derived from it. I think, as Gordon mentioned earlier, it is so important for us to work as a management team. You've got the farmer, you've got the nutritionist, you've got the veterinarian, you've got your geneticist, you've got your animal scientist. Everybody must work together and interpret the data and manage the herd on that. So data collected and recorded on sheets, cards, and calendars must be processed before it's of real value to us. So data must be converted to information for us to use it. So the analyzed information should be able to guide the farmer, the veterinarian, the nutritionist to take action or make decisions on farm. That is for future planning. Otherwise, the data, if it's just lying there, the recording system is of no use to the farmer or the veterinarian. So it should answer 3 important questions, but we'll get to some more important stuff as well. What did the cows do historically, as well as the herd? The current performance of the herd and the cows, and then what does the future hold for the individual animals or the herd? So where do we get the data from? I'm sure you guys know that there's computerized systems that the farmers use. The software programs are developed. They should be practical, user-friendly, and affordable to the farmer, but they assist us in management decisions as well. As I said, the idea is of simplicity, cost-effective, and help us in decision-making, as the previous slide said as well. So the systems that's being used is from De La Val is Alpro and Delpro. There's Affimilk, there's Dimsa. The smaller ones are Plan Ahead, AgriMilk, Milkfriend, Trio Milk, and Divisa. But the main ones that's used by the farmers are Alpro and Delpro, and then Affimilk. So what's important with these programs, the farmers and the veterinarians must need to know how it works. There must be checks in place to make sure that the data is accurate, and the farmer must get the maximum return on their investment. So there's 3 categories, but I think we mainly use the last category, which is the integrated management program. This program is a fully featured management program that is incorporated with real-time sensors and monitors, such as milk flow meters and feeding systems. You've got your scales, you get your cow weights. And then these sensors and monitors send the information about the milk production, the feeding patterns of the individual animals or the herd to your recording system. So it doesn't sit in a book somewhere, it gets sent to a recording system. What we do need for computerized systems is clear animal identification. You get your ear tag, or you get the electronic ear tags, or your cow manager tags, or you've got the tag around the cow's neck. Data needs to be captured, that's manual or automatic. There's a detailed individual record for each and every animal. You do get management reports, activity lists. I'll talk about that. That will help you when you do your vet visits, your vet checks, and then we also get detailed reports as well. So the question is, again, back to information overload. How do I prevent it and overcome it? As I said, management information must be prioritized. We need to use the data effectively, all right? As I said previously, use all the experts, your nutritionist, your animal scientist, your geneticist. And then we need to evaluate the data and use the critical data. It's important that we keep it as simple as possible. And then what we heard this morning as well, we need to set goals, limits, or objectives on certain areas for the herd. If we don't do that, you're not managing the herd, you're not moving forward, you're not milking economically. So the data input or capture, that should be quick, simple, and error-free. If there's errors in the data, you're going to make some bad decisions because of errors in the data. So that should be error-free. Data capture, as you said, it's either automatic or manual. And as I said previously, it depends on the accuracy and the completeness of the available data recorded. So accuracy, availability, very important as well. Right. if we go to basic information that's recorded, if we go to the fertility, and that's now what Darby said, we need to make money, but we need to identify places that we can improve to make money for the farmer. So basic data for fertility that we record is the name, the identity, the date of birth, the lactation number. We do the calving date and information on calvings, like the sex of the calf. Is it twins? Is it just one calf? Was this dystocia? We record the estrus dates, the heat periods are served without services. We record the service or AI dates, the bulls that's used, the inseminator, the type of heat behavior. If we just look at an inseminator, if we don't get our cows to calve, it might be just one inseminator that's not AI correctly or something like that. But there we need to go to get the data and get on the farm as well. We do the pregnancy diagnosis, the date, the result, and then the expected calving date. And then any veterinary examinations or treatment given to the animal will go to the fertility as well. So we do get reports that we can monitor and do problem solving. So that information that we also need is the dam's identity and lactation number, the birth date and the weight. Identify the calf or the heifer, diseases, treatments, and mortalities. We do the weight, height, and condition scores at regular intervals. As Gordon said, the condition scores you can do while you pregnancy checking the animals. But with the computerized systems, I know some of the overseas guys are using cameras at this stage as well, doing condition scores, getting that feedback on the animals as well. Then the date served and the semen bull use, as we said previously, vaccinations and dosings, the date of pregnancy diagnosis, expected calving dates once again, and then individual cow heifer cards. So what do we get on specific cow cards? The information there. We get the pedigree detail. Why is that important? I'll show you. In the end, after all the recordings, all the data goes through to milk recording, we use the pedigree data and the production data to estimate breeding values for that animal. So we need the father and the mother, and you can identify certain lines for breeding as well. Fertility data, you know the cow isn't calf, whether or not, how many AIs did she take to conceive. You do get veterinary examinations and treatments. You get the general health information, possible mastitis, quarter infections, treatment, the culture, the specific somatic cell count of that animal. You do get the weight. As I said, the data that comes in from the management systems, they do take the weights, most of the guys. Then you also get the production information, which includes your milk yield for each lactation and your milk quality history. You also, if you do production recording, get your butterfat protein percentage per cow so that we can use that for breeding values as well. This is just a quick example of the cow card example, but we can skip this one. Okay, as I said, all this information is then used to identify breeding values of the animals. But in the end, I'll tell you how the breeding values work as well. What is important for you as veterinarians is action reports. What does action reports mean? Action reports is reports to select cows with some common characteristics and provide up-to-date information. This allows planning and management of groups of cows and the herd on a daily basis, resulting in better management. So you use an action list, worksheet, attention list, and then checklist as well. So why do we use action lists? It identifies a problem early, and it will limit the amount of milk loss as well as decrease the recovering period. That's got a huge impact on your economics and your baseline profit then. Then you get your daily group milk weights and activity averages are also available. And this also allows the farmer to identify a problem affecting the whole group immediately. And it will indirectly assist with nutritional management. you'll see we'll touch on nutrition as well, because it's a quite important aspect of your management as well. Then you can monitor trends, allowing implementation for preventative measures as well. So if you know a certain time of the year there's problems, you put preventative measures in place. And as I said, if you look at the trends, you will know what will happen usually. And then just the overall health can be measured on individual cow basis as well. So, action reports. It's important to remember you can define your own management criteria. A few examples of these reports: as cows more than 320 days of milk, that's quite long, that's a problem in fertility. Cows serve more than 3 times, so you get it, struggling to get that cow into calf. Cows that's not pregnant, cows fresh in milk, that's some of your most important cows. Cows with milk yield less than 15 kgs, cows due for culling, you can sort them in somatic cell counts, heifers that's older than 16 months and not pregnant. Those are all influencing the profit of the farmer. So we need to look at that, and that's where I said you set your goals and you strive in achieving those goals. Okay, if we look at performance analysis, that is for milk production and quality, health, fertility, and nutrition. The aim of capturing and analyzing and interpreting animal data is to increase the biological and economic efficiency of the farming operation, as I said previously. So performance needs to be measured against set objectives. That's I've also mentioned earlier. You don't know where you're going if you don't measure. So it is impossible to calculate the changes in a herd or management without analyzing herd data. Darby said it this morning as well. You can't manage what you don't measure. So the performance analysis, the reports that we use, support the management decisions that we make. We monitor the performance of the herd, and we can identify and quantify problem areas then, KPIs, key performance indices. So monitoring is basically the routine systematic collection and evaluation of information from the farm. Now, critical control points for dairy farm profitability that should be monitored can include the following: milk production and quality, your udder health, your general health of your herd, your reproductive performance, and then your cow and replacement heifer health and growth. So, all the areas of the dairy herd management are ultimately reflected in milk production. So milk production and quality reports is also available in various formats at a herd level, group level, as well as individual animal level over time. That can be scatter graphs, bar charts, histograms, lactation curves that help us in management as well. But that I'll show you in the presentation as well. So we need to use these reports effectively to pinpoint problems regarding some stuff like cow health, how cows are fed, manage them bred, and then indicating problems like the following. But I will touch on that as well on the milk recording side. The first one is poor initial production. Then there's failure to read pre-production. Your initial poor production is the cow adapted on the ration. Failure to read pre-production, has she got enough reserves? Then reaching peak production and late lactation, or a sudden drop in milk yield after reaching peak yield. And then we also get high somatic cell counts, and that can be indicative of subclinical mastitis. And then with regard to milk composition, it can also indicate problems such as low protein and butterfat percentage. You know, farmers get paid on protein and butterfat, but protein and butterfat also is an indication of your energy level in your feed as well as your roughage. But I'll touch on that as well. So yes, you can manage your milk price to a certain extent. Now, on your health side, there's routine and proactive healthcare management that can positively impact on almost all management areas of dairy herds. Important general health issues that needs to be monitored is environmental diseases, as you know, like mastitis, nutritional diseases, metabolic diseases such as milk fever and ketosis, bloat, lameness, infectious diseases, as well as parasitic diseases. So just a few checks on the health side. I said you can set goals for yourself, some key performance indicators. Now, I've got a few crude indices for a dairy farm on the health side. I'm just quickly going to run through them, and then you can manage your herd according to that. We don't want cow mortalities of more than 2% per year. Crude culling rate, not more than 25% per year. Forced culling rate due to mastitis, fertility, feed, poor production, not more than 10 to 15%. Then your incidence of clinical mastitis, you don't want more than 2% of cows per month. Milk fever, you don't want more than 2 to 5% of the cow's calf per month. Ketosis, not more than 5 to 10% of the fresh cow's milk per month. And then also your incidences of lameness, you don't want more than 5% of the cows per month. Okay, if we go to have a look at mastitis, it is very important health problem, especially in the dairy herds, as you know, and we need to monitor it. There's herd level monitors at a health that includes the following. You can see the incidences of clinical mastitis. You've got your bulk tank somatic cell count. Just be careful, it's an indication of the herd, all right? But it's a good indicator for a first line, just to identify whether there's a problem or not. And then the golden standard is your individual cow somatic cell count. All right, just a general one again. If your this table shows you the udder health standard in your herd, if you're below 125,000, your udder health is very good. But if you go to 500 to 700, that's not so good. So as I said, your bulk tank somatic cell count.
So, Suretha,
yes.
I just want to ask the attendees to please mute their microphones. Thank you. You can continue.
Okay. As I said previously, your bulk tank somatic cell count is your first and your primary indicator of udder health. And then your somatic cell count per individual cow is more sensitive indicator of your udder health then. So fertility, very important. Reproduction is the area which traditionally received most attention in dairy programs, as it provides a basis for measurement of management efficiency through an analysis of multifactorial aspects that affect it. Now, many factors affect the reproductive performance of dairy cows, such as the farming systems, the efficiency of milking, milk production, and general health, and other factors as well. So if we look at herd structure or composition, that is also data that we receive, that is data that is important, that is data that can be used to set up KPIs, as I said previously. So the herd structure is influenced by the calving pattern of the herd. We do get seasonal calving, that is more your coastal areas that we get, that's on pastures, but we get the year-round calving as well, and we need to manage that as well. So the herd structure or composition reports indicate aspects like the number of animals that is in milk, your ratio of milking cows to calves and heifers. I'll show some of these in the reports that we've got as well. Then your ratio of lactating to dry cows, we wanted like 84 to 16% lactating to dry, but we use a crude one that's 80-20, all right? So remember that figure, because I'm going to show you an example later on that's where the herd isn't on that one. We've got the age structure. So you know whether you've got a young herd, first lactation animals, that's the most, or is it distributed over ages, or is it an older herd with more older animals? We've got the lactation distribution, early, mid, and late lactation. That comes in again if you've got a seasonal calving herd, if you've got just your animals in early lactation, higher production, late lactation, lower productions, and then as well the average length of the lactation. So there's a few primary reproductive parameters that we can look at, but we do incorporate them in the reports as well. Average intercalving, we want between 380 to 410 days. We want less than 20% of the cows over 400 days of milk. The high producer cows, you'll see, has got a longer intercalving period, but it doesn't need to run away. Average days calving to first insemination, 65 to 75 days. Average days to calving to conception, 83 to 110 days. Average days open, less than 130. The lactation length, around about 305 days. But if you've got still levels of high milk production, it can go longer. And then the average diet period of 55 days roundabout. So you can set up KPIs according to that, where the herd is and where you do want to go there. There's also secondary reproductive parameters, but I'm just going to name a few. You've got your general conception parameters, cumulative conception rate, pregnancy rate, and then as well as heat detection parameters. I'll speak about that a little bit later as well. Then nutrition. As you know, feed cost makes up the majority of input costs. And I'm sure Kenneth is going to discuss that with you tomorrow as well. But it is so important, and we need to use the data. We use the data in the management's reports as well to get feedback on the nutrition. It cannot be overemphasized, the importance of nutrition. Nutritionists use various computer models to formulate rations, but there's different rations on the farm. If you get onto the farm, you'll know that. There's a ration that the nutritionist formulates, all right? There's a ration that gets mixed in the feed wagon. There's a ration that gets thrown out to the cows. And then there's the ration that the cow takes in. And those are usually different from one another. So we need to manage that as well. Okay, so what do the nutrition programs use to model these formulations and the requirements? They use the cow requirements. They use targeted milk production and solids. They set a goal, and that's what they want to achieve. They take into account environmental factors, and then also information available on the raw materials. So due to the primary influence of nutrition on milk production, the weight of the animals, the growth rate of heifers, fertility, and herd health, all the reports discussed in this session relate directly or indirectly to nutrition. So it is important to use that data. Okay, so all the areas, as you know, all the areas of dairy management are ultimately reflected in milk production. So the keeping of good records help to monitor the efficiency of the management, housing, nutrition, and all the things that we named already, while giving us a better understanding of fertility and health conditions. Okay, the other thing that we need to know, and I'm sure you know that as well, there's a complex relationship between these factors, and the emphasis must focus on the multifactorial nature of milk production and the adoption of a holistic approach. It is therefore the value of proper milk recording is relevant and essential for these integrated concepts of dairy animal breeding, nutrition, as well as herd health management. So if we get to milk recording or any recording system, It consists of two components, basically. It's the management, which includes your production, your feeding management, your reproduction management, your general health of the herd, your udder health and your milking machine, and your hygiene. And that is the data that we collect. We get the data from the milk recording, where you take samples from each and every cow every 4 or 5 week cycle. And then we get to the breeding value side as well. All the data that we collect, we use the production data, the calving dates, everything, and we calculate breeding values. As we said previously, if you don't know where your herd is, you don't know where you're going. So we need to calculate genetic levels of the herd and each individual animal as well, so that you can set up a breeding objective. So you know where your genetic level is, you know where your production is and everything. So according to that, you put a breeding objective together with economic important traits, and you then breed for that to reach that breeding objective. It helps you in your heifer selection, which heifers you need to keep, which one you can, if you've got more heifers than you can handle, which ones you keep, which ones you can let go. You can know which cows to select for future breeding. Your breeding objective help you with your bull selection, and then you can also breed bulls, but I think the bull selection is the most important one. Going forward, what do you want to do in your herd? Elena, you can go to the next slide, sorry. Elena? Hi, can you still hear me?
Suretha, ek hoor jou nog. Ek gaan gou vir Helene bel, dalk het iets fout gegaan met haar.
Okay, sis.
Ja, reg.
Suretha, sorry, can you hear me now?
Ja, ek hoor jou, skus.
Sorry, my signal was bad. I thought it was yours. So, and then I couldn't follow the presentation anymore. So I'm just going to continue. If you can just tell me where to start.
Okay. Have you started sharing, Elena?
Oh, shiver. Okay, sorry. I'm just continuing and without sharing. Just a second. Just a second, sorry.
Okay. Okay, yeah, we can just continue from there, the next slide.
Okay.
Okay. So what is the value of milk recording? You can quickly identify cows which are the most profitable in your herd, backed by data. You can identify and isolate cows with subclinical mastitis infection, for example. You can identify which cows produce the most milk, but I want to get there to the point that Darby raised this morning as well. It's not always to produce the most milk. You need to produce optimal milk, okay? Optimal milk production. That's the important word that we need to achieve, right? Then you know the butter, fat, and protein percentage of each cow. So you know what she's going to give you genetically. That's also an indication of nutrition, and I'll tell you just now they get paid on the body fat and protein percentage as well. You know which cows to breed, which ones are genetically superior, and you increase the sale value of surplus stock. Some buyers might pay more for milk recorded animals with official records. You can also identify poor performing cows that are not paying their way or covering their feed costs and need to be culled. If you've got expansion plans where the quota is going, you can help the farmer to know which cows to breed from for maximum profit. And then your somatic cell count, persistence of high somatic cell count. As I said earlier, if you've got a high somatic cell count, you're going to pay a penalty on that. And if you've got low somatic cell count, you get a rebate, a reward for that in your milk price. So in effect, you can manage your milk price as well. So breeding, feeding, and health. The information that you get from milk recording is essential for efficient management of a dairy herd. Because so much of the critical factors for success are being reflected in milk records, as we said previously. We use the milk yields, then we use the milk components such as protein, butterfat, lactose, MUN, then we use somatic cell counts as well. As I said previously, none of the factors that have an influence on milk yield is independent, but they are all interrelated. So a good understanding of these interactions will help us to understand the complexity of milk production. And if you haven't got data to back this, how are you going to do that? So a few factors that influence milk yield and composition is well known and include the breed and genetics. As you know, Holstein cows produce more milk while Jersey cows produce the solids. Your herd structure, is it more first lactation animals? Is it older animals? The stage of the lactation, early lactation animals produce more than the later lactation animals. There's the calving pattern again, seasonal calvers, the age, the nutrition, other and general health, your productive performance, your days open, and then also environmental factors such as season, heat, stress, and everything else included in that. So we use lactation curves for individual cows for the herd or per lactation group to effectively pinpoint problems regarding how cows are fed, managed, and bred. I'll give examples in the following slides as well. Early lactation, as you know, is a very complex period, and how well cows and heifers are freshened and made the transition period in the early lactation is critical. So in the data that we get back, we can see if there's a problem or not, and we need to know how to handle that from there. Okay, then also the dry cow management and the condition and the health of the cows at calving is also of critical importance. So if we get to the reports now, as we said, days of milk is an indication whether you get your cows in calve or not. Long days of milk is a problem. On this chart, the green bars are the productions of the animals, while the red line is the days of milk, how many animals there is. And if we have a look at this graph, there's about 26 to 27% of the animals over 305 days of milk. So that is a problem. So we need to go back to the farm, speak to the farmer. We've identified the problem, but we need to see where the problem is coming from. Why doesn't he get his cows into calve? That might be nutritional, it might be environmental, it might be health issues. We need to pinpoint what is going on there. As we said earlier, we use the production curves as well. The first graph, let's have a look. The green dots are the first lactation animals. The blue dots are the second lactation animals. And then the red dots are the 3+ lactation animals. So how do we use this graph to identify problems? In these three graphs, I can tell you there's a problem with the compensatory growth of the first lactation animals. So they might not have the intakes that they're supposed to have, and they're not growing and producing at the same time. If we look at the first graph, I've put a red line there at about 180 days in milk. After 180 days of milk, their production drops, okay? So they're not producing and they're not building reserves and they're not completing their compensatory growth. What we want from first calvers is a more flat lactation curve. So you can see this effect of the first lactation animals' productions dropping there from 180 days goes over into the second lactation animals. If you have a look at this graph, you can see that the second lactation animals doesn't peak as high as the older animals. So they don't get into the lactation with the necessary reserves. So we need to go and see why. Is it in the intakes? What is happening on the farm? The second graph, you'll see the productions of the first lactation and all the lactations as well just go down. So they're not completing their growth either. The ideal graph is the third one. The productions start off lower, they reach their peak, and they keep their production. So those animals do complete their compensatory growth. You can see the second lactation animals also showing the peak as the older animals as well. So that is quite important. Then on the productions, body reserve, I spoke about that as well. You can have a look at this graph. The productions is just going down. It affects all the animals. So it comes through from the first to the second to the third plus lactation animals. Then also on the nutrition side, if we look at this lactation curves of these animals, you can see there's quite a lot of variation in the same stage of the lactation in the same age groups as well. So we can say, okay, there might be a feeding space problem or the animals are selecting the feed. But I want to tell you, we don't just look at one graph. There's loads of graphs that we use to come to the conclusion that we do. But with an eye that we can just see in one instance, that might be the problem. So all the data helps you to identify problems. So milk yield, if we look at that, if you get a sudden drop in the tank average of more than 5% or more than 10% in individual cows, it might indicate or predict a metabolic problem in your herd. That can be caused directly or indirectly by management or other health problems. The absolute yield levels can also indicate likely metabolic or possible fertility problems. So if we go to the reports, before we go to the reports, sorry, the main factors that can cause a sudden drop in your milk production, you can go on, Helena, the next slide. In milk yields might be sudden changes in management, particularly your nutrition, as I said. Sudden climatic changes like rain or maybe a heat wave coming around, the cows not eating like they should. Then there's also diseases like mastitis and ketosis. And then your water supply, that's quite an important one as well. If the cows don't drink, they can't produce. All right. If we get to the reports, helping us identifying the problems, the first graph is indicating a possible ketosis problem. But as I said previously, we don't just look at one graph, we look at more than one graph at a time. This one, we use a protein butter-fat ratio, and you can see the animals that I've circled in the top. Those are the animals at risk of possible subclinical ketosis in the early lactation. All right. Then we also can identify animals with acidosis problems. That is effective fiber in your nutrition that we can have a look at. And that also might influence your, as I said, reproduction and your milk production as well. So we need to take all the factors into consideration. As I said previously, you're not only producing milk, the thousands of liters, you also look at your solid percentages such as protein and butterfat. If you can manage that, It can have a big economic impact on your farming operation as well. So what are the milk components? Milk is composed of approximately 87% water, 5% lactose or milk sugar, 3 to 4% milk protein, and then 3 to 5% milk fat. Okay, solids non-fat consisting of lactose, butterfat, milk protein, and milk urea nitrogen. We use lactose. Sorry, if you just can quickly go back to the previous slide. Sorry, Elena. If we use lactose as an indication of stress on the animals, I'll get to that each individual just now. Butterfat, as I said previously, we can use as an indicator of your roughage or effective fiber in your ration. Milk protein is an indication of your energy in your ration. And then your milk urea nitrogen is of your crude protein in your ration. But I'm sure Kenneth will discuss that with you tomorrow as well. You can go on, Helena. We use the curve of the lactose that we get back as well. It can be an indication, as I said, low lactose of stress. Below 4.8% lactose, we take usually as stress. The stress might be nutritional, high MUNs, low intakes, animals milking off their backs. We might get a seasonal effect like heat stress, mud stress, but somatic cell count, mastitis might also affect your lactose percentage, and it might also be a milking machine problem. On this graph, I just want to show you, I'll show it later on again. It's mostly the first and second lactation animals with a slightly lower lactose percentage. So we need to go and identify what is going on the farm. So we need to use the data. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Elena. The butterfat percentage, I've put on 3 graphs again, but as I said, it's a rough indication of our effective fiber in your ration. The first one is your protein butterfat ratio. The red line is the ideal, while the blue line is the indication where the herd is lying. So if it lies above, I usually say it might be an indication of a lack in effective fiber. If we look at the second graph, you'll see there's quite a few animals with low butterfat percentages. And in the third graph, there's only a few animals in the early lactation, but it's the younger animals. So how do I identify what the problem might be? It might be intakes. The last graph, I'll say, is the intakes. It might be intakes of the younger animals. That's not what it's supposed to be. The lower butterfat percentage might also be an indication of acidosis in your herd, as we said previously. We do get the seasonal effect as well on the butterfat. If you get a heat spell, the animals don't eat, butterfat percentages go down. Seasonal also on your pasture herds. The growth cycle of your pastures, when there's a lot of effective fiber, when there's less fiber, as I said, heat. Amino acid balancing, I'm sure Kenneth will discuss with you guys tomorrow as well. What they do, they balance the feed with amino acids, and they pull down the butterfat percentage in the early lactation so that they get a higher production and lower percentages. And then Menensen has also got an influence on your butterfat percentage. Okay, your protein percentage. The first one we're going to speak about is your negative energy balance. So we use the data to identify the problem. So on the first graph, you'll see we're using the protein butterfat ratio again. In the early lactation, you'll see it's below the ideal. So I'll tell this guy that there might be a possible negative energy balance, but you will always have a negative energy balance. We need to get out of that negative energy balance as soon as possible. So we can see on the second graph, this guy gets out of the negative energy balance at about 60 to 70 days. So that's quite good. But the third graph, the negative energy balance continues to about 120 days. So that is an indication that that guy isn't going to get those cows into calf before 121 days. So that extends your days of milk. The first graph that we showed you, that guy with loads of animals with high days of milk, and then your intercalving period is also affected. So we need to use the data to identify the problem, to correct the problem. Okay, if we look at protein percentage, the next slide. You can also get an energy deficiency. You can see it's right through the lactation on the first graph and on the second graph as well. That's the protein percentage. Again, once again, the first lactation, second and 3+ lactational. Energy deficiency might be due to intakes, the wrong source of the energy, that it's not available in the rumen. High MUN might also influence your energy, your protein percentage, and then your seasonal effects. The heat stress on the animals, high MUN together, it might push down your protein percentage, the available energy in your ration then as well. If we speak about milk urea and nitrogen, which is also analyzed, the data is used to tell us what's going on in the herd. If you get a high MUN like this in the first graph, it might be an oversupply of crude protein. It might also be that there's enough crude protein, but there's not enough energy to utilize that crude protein. So that's where we and you guys as veterinarians must work together with the nutritionist to see what is the scenario and what is the problem and to correct on that. Okay, if you get low MUNs, it's usually an intake problem or a deficiency in crude protein in the ration. The middle graph I want to discuss with you. We want the animals to be there in the middle. Then it's a balanced ration. But if you go below the bottom line, it's usually energy deficiency or intake problem. So if I lie there, you say your MUN is high. If the animal is lying there, I'll tell you, if you up the energy, they might move in there. But if the animals is moving in this block, I'll tell you it's rather an oversupply of crude protein. Now, this is also quite a big problem on pastures. If you fertilize pastures, you're not supposed to go into those pastures before 21 days after you fertilize them. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems with this. And high MUN values, you'll know, will influence your herd fertility as well. So once again, it goes back to herd fertility, nutrition, management. Somatic cell counts, that's got a huge impact on your milk price as well and your general health of your herd. The first graph will show you there's almost no animals with somatic cell counts below 100,000. That's quite a problem, and I'll tell you, this guy must look at his milking machine. He must identify possible causing organisms, culture them. And then the second graph, it's much better. You'll see the average is below 100,000. There's a few animals, second lactation and first lactation animals with higher somatic cell counts, but that might be due to stress on the animals. I'll indicate it on the next slide. Sorry, this one is just the first one that I said again. Have a look at overmilking, milking machine. This slide is now the one that I said that the first and second lactation animals has got higher somatic cell counts. But if we look at this lactose graph, you'll see they've got lower lactose as well. So there is stress on those specific groups of animals, the first and second lactation animals. And you need to go and identify what the problem might be. Okay, I said on the bulk tank sample, you should be just careful just to use the bulk tank sample. Just to give you an indication, the first left side of the slide is a 100-cow herd, but every cow contributes to the bulk tank sample proportionally. So if you have a look, there's 3 animals contributing 51% of the somatic cell counts to the tank. So if you take out those 3 animals, your somatic cell count in your tank will go down. So that's why I'm saying that's a quite good, it's an indicator, your first one, but then we need to go to individual animal cell counts. The second one is also a 100-cow herd, but there's about 20-25 animals contributing 50% to your bulk tank in the somatic cell count sector. Okay, then again, action list, just a few examples, action lists that you can get. LogicSync is a program that sends out weekly reports. The action list that's in there is the completed lactations. We show you the heifers older than 2 years, the cows ready for PDs, cows that's not inseminated, cows that's not pregnant, cows under pressure, cows possible ketosis and acidosis, and then also cows with high somatic cell counts. So just an example, I'm going to show you a few points on this. This is the reproduction and herd composition. If we have a look at your heifers, the number of heifers, 6 to 18 months, there's 1797 heifers on this farm. But if you have a look, the age group 6 to 18 months, there's 17 and 24 heifers. So something happened there. There's no heifers in that age group. What's going on? Why did those heifers not make it? So you need to go and identify what's going on there. Then if we have a look at the age at first calving, this herd is sitting at almost 29 months. So there's something wrong. He's not getting his heifers into calf early enough. We want them to calf down at about 24, 25 months. He's only calving down at 29 months. So something with the herd fertility is not right. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Just think back what I told you about the cow stats. We want about 80% of cows are milk, 20% dry. If we cows, there's 1,017 cows. So animals inseminated, animals that's pregnant. So we give you a figure of how many straws you use per conception. So what do we see in this herd? He's struggling to get his heifers into calf. Okay, he's using 3.7 straws, and on the older animals only 3.37, and we want it the other way around. Okay, so why is there a problem? That's where we need to record the data. Is there a specific inseminator? Is there specific specifics that's going wrong? If we go just down to the intercalving period, the average intercalving period of this herd is 403 days. If we look at the second lactation animals, they're sitting at 451 days. So that's a problem, and we need to look at that problem and then solve the problem and make money for this farmer. Okay, Yelena, you can go to the next slide. As I said previously, genetic levels, we need to know where we are to know where we will be going. I'm just quickly going to run through this. As I said previously, we use this data to all the data that we get to breeding values. This guy, if you have a look at the cow's breeding values, this side, it's for production and protein percentage and everything else. You can see he's lying to the left. So the cows isn't doing that great. But if you look at the size that he's using, those aren't the size that he's supposed to use. We want the breeding values on the right-hand side. So you can go to the herd level, the cows and the breed, and you can see where you're lying according to the breed, and then the genetic levels of the bulls that you're using as well. Are you going in the right direction? You can see the trends over time. You saw some of the other trends this morning as well. You can see the milk production, your herd to the breed on the specific milk production, the butterfat percentage and everything. So you know where you are according to the breed, and you can adjust where you need to. Okay, we can go to cow selection. As I said earlier, you get cow breeding values on individual level to know which cows are your better cows to breed with. Then we get to the exciting part, the genomics, and I'm almost finished. we did a DGP project to get a reference population to be able to get GEBVs, so that the breeder has the advantage of using genomic results as a management and breeding tool as well. Basically, what it means is that the farmer can identify animals at an earlier age to breed and to know what they breed. Okay. You can also identify the genetic merit that will be carried over to the next generation, and so you can make faster genetic improvement. So how do we do it? You use the single-step evaluation method. We say in the world of genomics, phenotype is still king. So we still need the measurements, and that's all the data that we've been talking about all the time. We use the measurements, and we use the pedigrees. We get the SNPs back, the genomic parameters, and then we get the GEBVs. Okay, just for reliability, as I said, you can identify the animals at an earlier stage. Previously, if we used the pedigree in the measurements, the parent average, the accuracy of the data was only 30%. If you get offspring, it jumped up to 60%. But now with genomics, this stays the same. But in between, we get the genomic tests back, and the accuracy jumps up to 54% without any offspring. And if we do get the offspring, it goes to 90%. So you can see, you can identify those animals at an earlier stage. Just a quick 1 year, you can see the bull was born in 2019. It was genotyped, and its reliability is already sitting at 48%. So a young bull, 2 years old, already at 48%, where in the past, you needed a bull 6, 7, 8 years to be proven. Okay, you can go to the next slide. We also have a look at single gene traits, just quickly, parent verification, DCAT, that's for butterfat percentage, so we can go and select animals on that. And then there's other single gene traits, but I'll show you in the next slide what they are as well. This, just to indicate, there's a 2010 bull, but he's already 98%, but he's got daughters, where the previous bull didn't have any daughters and was already sitting at almost 50% accuracy with genomics. Use of data, once again, single gene traits. As I said, you can see the Blad, Dumps, Weaver syndrome. The breed relatedness is just to say that it's a purebred animal, but I want to show you here, this bull is breeding A2 milk, so that's good for us, but it's got the Jersey haplotype 1 gene, and that's detrimental. If you get 2 copies of that gene, one from the mother, one from the father, you won't get that many calves. You won't get, the fetus will die off. So that has got a huge effect on our fertility. Okay, you can go on. These just genomically enhanced breeding values. That's the older bulls, so you'll see that the breeding values isn't that great. We want these positive. As I said, okay, you can go and carry on, Helena, that's fine. We said we need the pedigrees of the animals. We can go back as many pedigrees back, many generations, but we need to record that. We need the data. Okay, you can go to the next slide. We also put together selection indices. What is that? That's just your breeding values, your production values, your protein percentage. Put into an indice according to economical value, just to make it easier to select animals. All right. As I said, the single gene traits, we tell you is it A2 milk, the butterfat one, the yellow milk fats, horn baldness, blads, and dumps, just to make sure that you don't breed animals with those defects. So that was now a mouthful, but without effective use of data and information available to you, you are literally milking cows in the dark, and that's not good. So we need to make effective use of data, and that will help us bring light to the darkness. Thank you. As I said, that was now a mouthful, and there's loads of information and the data that we need to use. but it's important for us to use the data. And as Gordon said, if you want to start doing more consultation work in the end, contributing more to the herd, working with the CRISPR, working with SA Statbook, you need to use the data that is available to you, and then work together with all the consultants that's in the management team of that farm specifically.
Thank you, Suretha. The people who would like to ask Suretha some questions can continue. You can also make use of the raise your hand option and then just unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can write it down. Dr. Martin van der Leek. You can continue, Dr. van der Leek.
There, that's better. Suretha, can you just talk about the practical steps? How do you get an animal genomically tested, and what does it mean to have a reference population?
Okay, the steps to get an animal genomically tested, it's quite easy. You can take a sample of the tail hair. They usually say straight after birth, but we just a bit cautious because the bulbs at the end of the hair doesn't contain that much genetic information. So if they're bigger, there's more information. So we say, you can take it at birth, but just make sure that you've got enough bulbs at your tail end hair. You send it away to SA Statbook. We send it to the labs where they extract the DNA and they do the test, and then they send back the raw data. In connection with the reference population, why it's so important. Our animals, South African conditions differ from other countries, and some of our genetic breeding values that we get, we've got dairy form where some guys have stature, so they're not comparable to one another. So we go through interval to get those values to be comparable over countries. Okay, so that's why you can use an overseas bull. We can tell you what his daughters will do in South Africa. But it's important to have our own reference population of the South African population. If we do not have that, they don't include our cow data. If we do it on an American scale and so on, they don't include our female animals in that because they haven't got that data on the female animals. So they use the average of the female animals, say in Europe or in America. They use that reference population then for us, which isn't the true reflection of what is going on in our herds in South Africa, the production levels, the fertility, anything like that. So that's just in a nutshell. I don't know whether that answers your question, Martin.
Yes, it does. So I just want the students to know that the principle of a reference population is used for genetics, and then it's also used for near-infrared testing of forages. And the same principle there, that the value reflects what you're testing, and you need to have a comparative database that reflects the local situation.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important for us. Even if we're doing genomics, we do still need those measurements. That's why I said as well, in the world of genomics, phenotype is still king. It helps us. It's a management tool. It gives us a heads up, and it's quicker, faster genetic progress that we do get. But yeah, we still need our recording systems as well in place.
If I may, Suretha, another question. Can you just explain that advantage of genomic testing as far as generating data from a specific bull? You were talking about the 7 years versus 2 years. Just explain that.
Yeah, it's much quicker now, as I said. If we can just go back to that slide, Elian. Previously, you had to have offspring because you can't measure milk production on a bull itself. So you need to measure that what the daughters of that bull is doing. So there only you get the production figures. Otherwise, you only use the parent average. And as I said, the parent average is only 30% reliable. All right. So with genomics, we can see exactly which part of the production the animal inherits from its father and mother. And we can see exactly, okay, this is the top producer. And it's the reliability, as I said, it's much higher. It's sitting about 54% without any offspring. So Martin now said as well, the 7 years and so on, the cows need to get pregnant, they need to calve down, their daughters need to produce first, and that's where that 6 or 7 years comes in. While with genomically tested bulls, the turnaround is much faster because we get that genomic information and the reliability is then higher at an earlier stage. So you don't need to wait 8 or 6 years for a bull to be proven. It can happen much faster with the genomics.
Suretha, just give them a better idea of the years in the old approach.
And the old approach, yes, I used to work with Taurus as well. It can take up to 10 years because you've got more bulls that you're testing, and to narrow that down, it really takes years and years. It might take 10 years. And as I said, they start using bulls now at 2 years of age, and it's almost a proven bull.
But can you try it in an even more basic way? Year 1, the bull grows up. Year 2, because this is a concept that's not always that easy to grasp for somebody who's not familiar with the dairy industry.
Yeah, okay, as you said, the bull gets born, eh? Then the bull needs to grow up, reach puberty, be able to jump the cows or produce semen. So say that's 2 to 3 years. And then that semen gets used on the cows. The cows is pregnant for 9 months. You need to grow out that heifer. That takes almost a year, and you can inseminate her. Then she only calves down at 2 years. And then she's in milk production for lactation is another year. So only after that lactation is completed on that timeline, so 4 or 5 years along, you get the first data from your daughters. So in the old method, it took time to get the measurements. While with the genomics, as I said, you get the data much faster. You don't need daughters in milk to get the figure for the bull. The bull gets genomically tested, and we can see what the expected breeding values is. And as I said, it's much more reliable then. Perfect. Sorry, is that a better answer?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Suretha, we've got no more questions. Is there anybody else who would like to ask something? Okay, then we finish for the day. We will thank you, Suretha, for your presentation.